And we gotta pull the curtain back, because the way that a lot of us met, the three of us met, through Adrian and through each other and through just mutual friends, was truly through traveling to wrestling shows, particularly Wrestlemania,
Yep.
right? And particularly the event that it's become now, where it's not just the show, now it's a 2 night show, but all the surrounding, indie shows and events and signings and what have you. And it really becomes this kind of week long, event that you have to be at live, because it doesn't do it justice to get the vibe and that ambiance and that energy you get when you're at a WrestleMania
Definitely.
host town. So I'll pose this question to y'all. And Adrian, I'll start with you.
Okay.
What's a memory, kind of a fond memory, not really of the show itself, but maybe surrounding that WrestleMania week, that you might be able to share with the audience that you really enjoyed in traveling or being part of that?
Man, I have so many because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, a lot of us, Greg and myself, we've traveled together for shows. Shout out to Byron, shout out to Randy,
Hmm.
those good guys. We developed a family, and it always felt like it was a family reunion. We all knew going into April, like going back, what, January, that's when we would really start.
Oh yeah.
That's when the negotiations would start. Like, hey, are you going? So, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and you're in charge of getting these tickets. You're in charge of getting these tickets. Like, it's that sort of exciting thing where it got to the point where my employees of my restaurants, they knew what week WrestleMania was, because that's when Boss Man was out of town. And so like I said, it's plenty of great memories, but one memory in particular, this was in Orlando, and I actually got to meet my favorite manager of all time, arguably the GOAT, Jim Cornette. And it's funny because Greg and I had a hotel room together, and Greg went out for an event or something that evening, and I was like, "Nah, I'm just gonna lay back. I'm gonna recharge my batteries, so I'm ready to go all day tomorrow." Right?
Mhm.
So I say, "Hey, I'm gonna order pizza for us or whatever." So I order a pizza. I go to the lobby to go get said pizza, and sure enough, I go to the elevator, and somebody yells, "Hey, can you hold that elevator?" And who comes in? It's Jim Cornette. So anyone that knows me knows that I'm a huge Cornette mark. I love the guy, even, despite some things that have happened before, but I love the guy. He's a huge part of my childhood. So I I approach him in a cool manner. Like, I one thing that Greg and I agree on, and I know Adelie would also, when
Mhm.
you meet your favorite wrestler, show some gratitude, but don't come off like a
Hmm.
super fan and nerd out and all that, even though that's going on in your head and heart. So keep it simple, and just, hey, Mr. Cornette, just want to say you've been a huge part of my life, and I really appreciate all that you've done for the industry. And leave it at that. Some wrestlers take that in a perfect manner. They engage the conversation,
Mhm.
and also some don't. Some just like, well, whatever. But you didn't put yourself out there to just be absolutely ridiculed.
Yeah.
And the way that Cornette responded, he was very thankful. I think he was doing the Hall of Fame that weekend, and that was
Mm.
the reason why he was in town. He was actually introducing someone for the Hall of Fame, and he told me about it. He was like, "Yeah, man, I'm super excited uh, to do this Hall of Fame. Hopefully, I'm in one day, that sort of thing." And the most memorable part of that whole experience, mind you, this is an elevator trip, so it's not the longest,
Mhm.
but the cherry on the top, he asked, "Hey, where'd you get that pizza?" And I told him, told him the number. And I said, "What, are you hungry? You eat pepperoni?" He was like, "Yeah, I'll eat pepper." I said, "Take a slice, man. But it'll be my absolute pleasure." So I can at least say WrestleMania weekend, I got to share pepperoni pizza with my all-time favorite manager, Jim Cornette. So salute to him. And like I said, wrestling fans, listeners, when you meet one of these guys, they're normal like you and I. So show some gratitude, but don't be a supermarket about it, even though I know you want to.
That's great. Wow, what a story, and what a kind of just serendipitous moment, right?
Yeah,
Where
man.
you're just surrounded at those, Mania hotels or anything like that, but like you said, it's that approach that matters so much and can be make or break what kind of interaction
Definitely.
you have.
Oh, for
That's
sure. And I
great.
remember as soon as he started saying that, I knew exactly what story he was about to
Yeah.
tell because
Yeah.
30 seconds after he got off that elevator, I had a text. He
Mm-hmm.
was like, dude, you're not going to believe who's in our hotel.
Right. Yep. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, Greg, that's a good segue because since you guys spent some time together, what's one of your
Mm.
memories from Mania weekend?
Man, I'm like Adrian. I have so many because to me, like you kind of touched on, Mania week is so much more than Mania. It's
Hmm.
it's a gathering of so many like people. Like a lot of times, let's be call it what it is, right? Society looks at us as like, y'all know that's fake, right? And they kind
Right.
of look
Right.
at you a
Right.
little bit of an outcast, especially if you've grown up watching this stuff.
Yeah.
And you get down there, and everywhere you go, it doesn't matter what you have on. I remember being in New York and I wore my Roman Reigns stuff, and everybody gave me a hard time about it. I didn't care. Adrian, we've talked about it before. I've been on
Yep.
Roman's bandwagon forever.
Yep.
And everybody gave me a hard time. I didn't care. It was just fun, right? And it's just doesn't matter what shows you go to or whatever. Um, but thinking about a conversation I had um at WrestleCon, and this was
Hmm.
in Orlando as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I had recently listened to a podcast with Abyss, and Abyss used to work for the Atlanta Knights, which was a hockey team here in Atlanta. He was in the marketing area, and I just happened to hear something him talk about it, right? And I'm like, I used to go to those games all the time.
Yeah.
And I was at the Omni watching these games. They played in the International Hockey League,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, IHL. They won the Turner Cup, which is the championship. So when I came in contact with Abyss, we talked for like 15 minutes, nothing about wrestling, not one word about wrestling, all
Nice.
about the Atlanta Knights. I said,
Nice.
Wow.
Abyss, man, I happen to hear you used to work for the Knights. He's like, yeah. Hey, he goes, hey, yeah, I just talked about that. I said, yeah, I used to go to those games. We started talking about how the atmosphere was. What was crazy, and this is just wild. They used to have this trumpeter that came down, and he'd be getting the crowd all hyped up
I
and like just
remember that.
and he'd be playing the trumpet and he'd come running down, and hit the glass. Well, we're on the championship series deciding game. This dude comes running down the aisleway, hits the glass breaks, y'all. He hits his head on the
Oh,
ice. They have to stop the whole thing. Here's this trumpeter. He gets carried out like on an ambulance. So this is Abyss telling me his side of that story. He's like, dude, you remember this? And we're going back and forth about it. Like, hell yeah. I was like, I thought he was gonna die. I was like, he's like, he goes,
Jeez.
we all thought he was dead because how hard he hit that ice. Like they took him out. And he was
Mm,
like immobile. He was like on the board, just like a pro wrestling thing though. He came back at the end of this game
nice.
with the neck brace on. It wasn't a work. It was for real. But he came back with the neck brace on. He came out and was like had a little trumpet and just played a little bit. The place went freaking nuts. And it
Nice.
was just like it was exactly a pro wrestling angle. 100%
Mm,
where the dude gets hurt in the beginning of the match and then here comes Terry Funk, just crawling back out to the ring.
right.
And it was just so funny to have this conversation with Abyss. And I think the cool thing about it is because so many people have a perception of WrestleCon of like you got to pay for this, you got to pay for that, which is fine. Him and I just stood around talking. There was
Mm-hmm.
no
Hmm.
expectation that I had to buy a picture, I had to take a picture, I didn't have to do anything, dude. I was like, man, I even said, hey, do you want me to get something? He's like, I don't care, I just have fun standing around talking about something that wasn't wrestling. Goes
Mm-hmm.
back to what Adrian said. Everybody's
Mm.
just like all the rest of us, right? And I did thank him. I said, hey, man, I appreciate this conversation, but I thank you also for everything you do, right? And he was like, no, man, I love
Yep.
it. I love this stuff. and that was it, right? I think that's one of my favorite moments. Can I share one more
That's awesome.
also
Yeah.
from
Of
there?
course, yeah, knock out.
That same weekend, my son was at a roller hockey tournament and had gotten hurt, and he had gotten hit in the eye with a stick. And I'm not there. His mom's not there. He's with somebody else. I'm like, really? Of all the weekends you get hurt, and neither one of us are there.
Mm.
Well, he loved Moose, and I went to
Mm-hmm.
Moose and said, hey man, can you record a video for my son telling him to get well? And I showed him the pictures. Like, hell yeah, I will. Record like and nowadays it'd be like a cameo. He sat there, hey man, I see you got hurt, and he cut this whole promo for him, and he's like, and I sent that off to him. It just made my kid's day. Like he wanted to
That's
call him on
awesome.
FaceTime, but my kid wouldn't get on the phone because he's like, I don't want
Oh.
nobody to see me, and but I thought that was cool too. He wanted to do that, but it was just what we're in, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
community we're in. It's just
100%.
how cool people are.
Mm-hmm. That was a good impact corner at
Yeah,
WrestleCon because I remember that because
it was.
what was it? EC3,
Yeah,
Moose. It was a number of
EC3 was cool
really
because
really popular guys
yeah,
there.
EC3 was so down to earth because I showed him a picture that I had taken in Atlanta,
Mm.
and he was Derek Bateman when he was
Mm.
in NXT, and I said, "Hey man, check this
Mhm.
picture." He's like, "Holy, we need to recreate that picture." And he had I forgot his valet's name at the time, and he goes, "She
Mm.
was just here," and he actually ran to try to find her to recreate that picture,
Oh my
and he
god.
couldn't
Nice,
find her. He said,
nice.
"Man, I'm so sorry." I'm like, I'm good. Like he was just I wasn't asking for the recreate. I just wanted to show him the picture,
Right.
and he thought it was so cool. He's like, "Man, thank you for saving that picture." And
Mm.
then when I posted it, I posted the picture of him and I, and then side by side, the Bateman one and that one, and he
Mm-hmm.
reposted it off of Twitter, and it was pretty cool. But
Mm.
yeah, because Bobby Lashley was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a really good TNA
It
corner.
was almost criminal how ignored that corner was.
Yeah,
And that's the
yeah,
reason why I was saying it because
Mhm.
everyone had their attention elsewhere.
hmm
But you got Moose, you got you got stars right here, and
Right.
they were largely being ignored, man.
But in the
yeah,
context of WrestleCon, when you have everybody there, it's like
yeah.
it's almost
Yeah,
like a hierarchy, right? Of like who you're.
true.
I know who you're going to spend your money on. This isn't WrestleMania related, but it is a weekend where New Japan had those Long Beach shows, the initial ones, and they had the meet and greets, and the Bucks had long lines, and Kenny had long lines, and Cody, everybody, and Osprey. Well, Osprey had like no
He
line,
had
which who I
nobody in
loved.
that
I loved the
line.
guy even then. And I walked up to him and I was doing something similar, long before Cameo, where I would ask him, "Hey, can you record a video for my pro wrestling club for my kids at the school I work?" And sure enough, I told him, "Yeah, I've shown him your matches. I showed him that match with Ricochet, that very controversial match, as it were."
Mm,
And he talks about really struggling in school and stuff like that, and wishing. So he writes this really beautiful. He tells this beautiful message on video, and brought it back to the kids. They loved it, but it's so funny because, like if I try to do that now, I mean, it'd be pretty impossible, and it
Mm-hmm.
just, but it's those moments where you can treat someone like a human, right? Because
yeah.
he had no line. I was just chit chatting with him, and like, oh, you're just the guy who loves what they do and has a job that
hmm
they love what they do. But my WrestleMania one isn't as much of a conversation. I wish I had like this deep, moving moment. I have it in other industries, not in wrestling yet. But it was WrestleMania weekend last year here in LA, and um, through a tumultuous bit, I ended up at the ROH show, the pay per view, and was chit chatting with the person next to me. They're like, "Hey, I'm trying to hit up the GCW show that was across town that bled into this show." It's like, well, I think we can make it. We probably won't be able to like get seats, but we might be able to get in, crash it, and try to get in. So we drive over, we get out the car, and of course it's sold out. They say like no, and the main event's about to come on. Main event was Joey Janela, Hijo del Vikingo. Now I'm a huge Hijo del Vikingo mark. The dude's fabulous. Definitely needs to take care of himself. I want him to last. And we're walking, and you got to understand the Ukrainian Cultural Center, where they hold a lot of the GCW shows. There is no dressing room. The dressing room is literally the street/alley next to
Mm.
the building. So I'm walking, and I see some wrestlers I recognize, and right there in the flesh on the sidewalk is Vikingo patting down his pads, doing the thing. But I don't at that point I don't realize he's coming on. I'm like, oh, he's just probably gonna warm up, but like, and like, hey, nice job, but I like what you do. It's like, oh, gracias, and then I speaking Spanish is a nice kind of like conduit to that. Like, hey, can I take a quick shot with you in the dark? So I have this kind of fuzzy picture in the dark with him, like, oh, thank you, gracias por venir, thank you for coming out, this and that, and we're having a real conversation. I see the other guy who I just met. He's like from Boston. And I'm like, hey, do you want to take a picture with him? Like, oh, sí, claro que sí. Man, like literally, like we go to front again, and they're announcing the main event. The dude was like the kindest man, but again, because that's the disposition, right? That's the disposition where he knows where he is, right? And I meet so many people who like approach luchadors in the right circumstance, right? Um, comes to mind the Sin Cara or Místico, I guess the original Místico, and they would have similar interactions with them, where it's like they'd catch him without the mask, because he's like, "Hold on, un momento, por favor," and he'd put on the mask, take the picture with you, and then
Nice.
disappear into the night.
Nice.
So it really is about approach, but it's a really fond memory just because it was so again, to use the word serendipitous, that we caught him at the right time, we didn't bother him, or I didn't bother him. And that's the beauty of Mania weekend. Again, going back to Greg's point, that's you're with other like-minded people. You're people who love this with a passion that, I mean, I don't know how many, I know there's passionate fandoms almost to a fault in this this, but when you can be level-headed, there really is that ambiance that you can capture and really, you know just make it part of your life, because that's really
Definitely
what this becomes, and that's the beauty of it.
If you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, and of course, look us up on socials at Suplex Dinner Club. And be sure to check out our other projects. We talk college football on Dogs versus All Y'all. That's a weekly college football podcast where we don't just talk about the Georgia Bulldogs, we talk about all things college football. The Life and Times Pod, which is short for the Life and Times of a Restaurant Lifer podcast, where I have some chill conversations with some cool and interesting people that I've met in my years in the hospitality industry. And of course, check out Talk 'em in the Building. That's a pro wrestling podcast where we solely focus on the promo. We talk about the talkers, we hype the hype men, and we pontificate on the promo. It's a fun project, and if you're a pro wrestling fan, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. If you're into TV and movie reviews, check out Four Corners Cinema with Ari and Adrian, a podcast where two lifelong pro wrestling fans review film and other forms of media that just so happen to have some of our favorite pro wrestlers. The Suplex Dinner Club family is growing, and I would love for you to be a part of it.